Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm Heidi Cundon, owner and chief creative director of happinessishomemade.com, where we share lots of fun Cricut projects and free SVG files, so be sure to hop on over there after class to check it all out. Today, I'm going to teach you how to layer Cricut Infusible Ink. Now, if you've never worked with Infusible Ink before, you are going to love it, but it does work a little bit differently than your traditional iron-on or heat transfer vinyl, so let me tell you a little bit about it. Infusible Ink is a super cool ink transfer product that produces professional quality results. It uses the sublimation process to infuse colored ink into your base material so that the ink actually becomes one with the item rather than just sitting on top of it like heat transfer vinyl does. And that means that Infusible Ink won't ever peel, fade, crack, or warp. It actually becomes part of the shirt or other substrate that you're using. As part of the sublimation heating process, Infusible Ink turns from a solid to a gas, so you can't layer it in the same way that you would with traditional iron-on, or else you're going to end up with blended colors and muddy layers. There are a couple of different ways of layering Infusible Ink, but I like to use a method known as slice and set. So today, I'm going to walk you through the steps of the slice and set process and get you on your way to layering Infusible Ink with seamless, professional results. Let's get started. I'm going to be using my Cricut Explorer Air 2 for these projects, but you could use any of the Explorer or Maker machines, and in fact, if you're making a small enough project, you could even use the Cricut Joy for these too. We'll be using the slice and set technique to customize a baby bodysuit with a simple heart and the baby's name. If you've never used the slice tool before, this is a great place to get started. Upload the heart SVG file and insert it into the canvas. For a baby onesie, I usually make the heart around 4 inches tall. Using the text tool, add the name and size it so that it's around 5 to 6 inches wide. I'm using the BFC Christmas cards font here. Now, if you were to cut and apply these layers just like they are here, the Infusible Ink would get hazy and it would turn a brownish color in the areas where the two layers overlap. We definitely don't want that happening, so we're going to need to use the slice tool to remove the areas of the heart that overlap with the text. To make sure that things are perfectly lined up, select both layers and use the Align tool to horizontally center them. Use the slice tool to split the overlapping layers into different parts, resulting in 4 new layers. The name is now sliced into 2 new layers, and the heart now has 2 layers as well. We need to remove the overlapping areas of the heart, so go ahead and delete that layer from the Layers panel. Next, make the text a single layer again by selecting both slices and using the Weld tool to rejoin them into one. So now we're left with 2 layers, the name and the heart with a negative space that perfectly fits the name like puzzle pieces. When you're ready, click on the green Make It button. Make sure to mirror each of your mats before cutting. For the heart layer, I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit so that there's enough room on the plastic transfer sheet to fit the heart and the name. Use the Custom Materials setting on the dial of your Explorer Air 2 and then select Infusible Ink Transfer Sheet from the Materials list. I always like to use more pressure when cutting Infusible Ink, but that's going to depend on your specific machine. Yours might be just fine with the default pressure. Load the mat and cut. Then, repeat for your second color. You might notice that the color of the Infusible Ink sheet is much lighter than the color on the box, but don't worry, that's totally normal. The ink will become much brighter and more vibrant once it's been heat pressed. Once the ink is done cutting, it's time to weed it. If you haven't worked with Infusible Ink before, you'll notice that it's much thicker than iron-on and it weeds a bit differently. Slightly bend and roll the backing paper until the smaller pieces crack away from the other pieces, and use your hands to weed away the excess. Traditional weeding tools like a weeding hook can actually press tiny amounts of ink back into that plastic carrier sheet, and those small spots of ink will transfer to your project. So it's always recommended to skip the weeding tools and use your hands to weed infusible ink. If you do need to use a tool to help, I recommend using a small pair of tweezers and making sure that you're extra careful with them. Carefully remove the letters from the plastic backing and place them into position on the other piece. Preheat your heat press or your Cricut Easy Press to 385 degrees. Cover the bodysuit with a sheet of butcher paper and press for 15 seconds to remove any residual moisture, and then allow it to cool completely. Place a sheet of white cardstock inside of the bodysuit to prevent any of this ink from bleeding through to the backside. Use a lint roller to remove any lint, fuzz, or debris that might cause your ink to transfer improperly. Place the sheet of infusible ink on top of the bodysuit, ink side down. Cover the design with a sheet of butcher paper and press for 40 seconds. Allow to cool completely, and then peel back the carrier sheet to reveal your design. Look at how much brighter and more vivid that infusible ink looks now. If you look closely, you can see that the infusible ink has actually bonded with the polyester fibers of the fabric and become a part of the garment. That means that you never have to worry about this design peeling, cracking, or fading, and it can stretch right along with the shirt. Now that you know the basics of the slice and set method, let's try a couple of different variations that you might find useful. First, let's add a white border around the name in our heart design, and then we'll talk about how to tackle a more detailed project. Let's go back to the basics of our heart design. I've uploaded the heart and I've added the text layer for the name. To create the white outline, select the text layer and click on the Offset button. Choose your offset size. I'm using 0.10 here, and make sure that you have weld offsets checked. You'll now have 3 layers: the heart layer, the text layer, and the text offset layer. This time, you'll want to use the slice tool on the heart and the offset layer. Move the text layer over to the side for a minute. And select the other 2 layers and use the slice tool. Like before, you'll see that it split the 2 layers into 4 new slice layers. Delete the overlapping layer from the heart, and then delete the 2 offset layers. What you're left with is a heart shape and a text layer that fits inside of the heart with a thin white outline around it. We're gonna make this shirt using the same process that we used for the baby bodysuit. Start by cutting your layers of infusible ink. Then, weed the infusible ink using the same technique. Make sure that you always have clean, dry hands when weeding infusible ink, because any moisture from your hands or residue from any lotion that you may have used can damage the ink and cause it to transfer improperly. If you do have trouble with your hands not being dry enough, you can always wear a pair of thin latex gloves during this step. We'll be using the heart carrier sheet to hold both the heart and the name for this design. When it comes time to position the letters inside of the heart, make sure to leave a thin border between the letters and the edges of the heart. This will end up being your white offset border when you press the design onto a white shirt. The white offset around the text works especially well when you're using patterned infusible ink, and it helps to provide some extra contrast to the text. You can add offsets to text, shapes, and images in Design Space, so this trick definitely comes in handy. Infusible ink can be used on all kinds of polyester and poly-coated surfaces, so there are tons of different options in what you can make with it. So, are you ready to tackle something a little more detailed? Upload the Heart Pizza Slice SVG file and insert it into a new canvas. You'll see in the Layers panel that everything is grouped, so the first thing we want to do is ungroup it all. This is going to leave us with a bunch of hearts that are still grouped together, and 3 other items that will be on their own individual layers. The crust and the red sauce layers are already cut to fit like puzzle pieces with the cheese layer. But those cute little heart-shaped pepperonis sit directly on top of the cheese layer, so we're gonna need to slice those 2 layers. Select the entire group of hearts and use the weld tool to merge them into a single layer. Then, select the welded heart layer and the yellow layer and click the slice tool. The slice tool will split the 2 overlapping layers into 3 new layers: the yellow base layer, red hearts, and yellow hearts from where the layers overlapped. Delete the yellow hearts layer and you're left with red hearts that fit perfectly inside the yellow layer. Size everything appropriately and click on the green Make It button to begin the cutting process. Don't forget to mirror each of your mats. We're going to use the plastic carrier sheet from the yellow infusible ink layer to hold all of the different colored layers, so we want to add a little more space around the yellow layer for the other pieces to fit on the backing sheet. Select Infusible Ink from the materials list. Load the material into the machine and begin cutting each of the layers. Weed the yellow base layer and then place each of the different colored pieces onto the yellow carrier sheet. Use a lint-free cloth and a lint roller to clean off the mug. Position the design onto your mug and wrap everything in a layer of butcher paper to prevent any of the ink from transferring onto your heating element. Preheat your heating element of choice. I'm using the Cricut mug press here, but you could also use a heat press or you could even use a convection oven. If you visit our site at happinessishomemade.com, you can find a full step-by-step tutorial for how to make infusible ink mugs in your oven. My favorite thing about the mug press is that there's no guesswork. The machine heats to the perfect temperature and it presses the mug for the optimal amount of time, depending on several different environmental factors. So it really is just as easy as preheating the machine, pressing the button, and waiting for it to beep and tell you it's finished. Once the machine alerts you that it's finished, carefully remove the mug and make sure to wear heat gloves because it's going to be very hot. Then set everything aside to cool. When the mug is cool to the touch, peel the paper off and reveal your design. The infusible ink actually bonds with the coating of the mug, so the results are durable, dishwasher safe, and they won't ever fade. Now that you know how to layer infusible ink, I hope you'll have a ton of fun creating a whole bunch of new projects. And don't forget, infusible ink can be used on any polyester or poly-coated sublimation base, so you can use it to create all kinds of things like tumblers, tote bags, kitchenware, clothing, jewelry, and much more. There are even wood and metal products made especially for sublimation. I can't wait to see what you make.